Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the YouTube channel grecochess, the channel where we discuss, we comment, we analyze, and we talk about the aspects of the game of chess. And this video, it's the last round, the sixth round of the USATE, United States Amateur Team East Championship that took place a few days ago, last weekend at Parsippany, New Jersey. In the first 5 rounds, I started with a loss, but then I had 4 wins, so I'm guaranteed to leave with at least 4 out of 6 points. Quite a respectable, a good performance. But what if I could get another win in the last round and end up with 5 out of 6? That would be even better. How is the team doing? We lost the first match, got a draw in the second, and we won the third, the fourth, and the fifth match. So now we have 3.5 out of 5. And with this score, we are contenders for the top senior team, meaning the top team that has all of its members at least 50 years old. 3.5, but we need to win the last round. And guess what? In the last round, we are facing another one of the contenders. But before we go to the details, let's look at the tournament itself. Let's share the screen and see how we are doing. Share. Here we're going to see the schedule. There were 2 games on Saturday, 1 and 7:30 p.m. We covered them in the first 2 videos of the series. Then 2 on Sunday, 11 a.m., 6 p.m. We also covered them. In the most recent video, we covered the game of Monday at 9 a.m. This video is about the last game starting at 3:30 p.m. on Monday, February 16th. And what is the time control? The time control for every game, it is what you read here in the last line, 40 moves in 100 minutes, sudden death 30 minutes, and 5-second delay throughout. What does this mean? It means that when the game starts, players have 100 minutes on their clocks, 1 hour, 40 minutes. When it's your opponent's time to think, meaning after you move and before they complete their move, of course your time does not move. Your clock does not move. You don't lose any of your time. When it's your time to move, meaning after the opponent completed their move, and until you complete your own move for the first 5 seconds, the delay as it's called, the clock does not move. Then it continues going downwards from wherever it stopped before. You must complete your 40 moves before the clock shows 0, because if it shows 0 and you have not completed 40 moves, you are timed out. And if you can do so, and if the game continues for more than 40 moves, then after move number 40, the two players, in fact, get extra 30 minutes, meaning if you did your 40 moves in 95 minutes, then you have five, the remaining, plus 30, 35 minutes for the remaining of the game. So now you must complete all of your moves before the clock goes down to 0 after you got your extra 30 minutes. That's what these things mean. Now, what else can we share? Let's share a photo of a team. And here we are with the wonderful t-shirts that we ordered just for this tournament, the Gov't Closed Opening. You see from the right is the number 1 player, the board 1, Mr. Brian Lawson. Next to him is Mr. Alan Cantor, who is board number 2. Next to him is a captain, board number 3, Mr. Jay Kleinman. And to the very left, you see myself. What else are we going to show? Who's our opponent in round number 4? Another of the contenders for the senior championship, meaning all their players were 50 years old or more, and they had also gotten 3.5 out of 5 points. So most likely whoever would win that match would become the senior champion. And here we are going to show the compositions of the two teams and their ratings. Let's share the screen with you. And where are we? I think is this. Why doesn't it show? Oh, here we are. You see what's happening. Our opponents, their team is called Don't Think Twice. And guess who is board number one? International master Jay Bonin. He's very famous worldwide because he has played more games than anybody else in the United States. I'm not saying one, but played. He's written a lot of great chess books, including the active pieces. And his rating is 2291. He's going to face Brian Lawson from a team with a rating of 2000, a difference of 291 points. Board number two, another strong player for Don't Think Twice, Mr. Timothy Mirabile, 2109. And on that side, his opponent is going to be Alan Cantor, rating 2000, and the difference is only 109 points. Board number three, Don't Think Twice is George Burke with rating of 2016. And on the side, it is Mr. J. Kleinman, 1814, a difference of 202 points. And if you thought these differences are quite significant, imagine what I had to face. Board number four, Leonard Chipkin for Don't Think Twice, rating 1915, and myself, Harry Larson is 1551. Yes, these are the January ratings. In February, it is 1631, my rating. But even if you count that, and by the way, Leonard Chipkin has moved to 1932 since then, we're talking about a difference of about 300 points. Meaning all of our opponents had more than 100 points more than us. And we expected to lose 4-0. It seemed that all four of us were hopeless. But could anything happen? You never know. And I'm going to show the game number four. Leonard Chipkin, that has the white pieces, and myself, that has the black. And we're going to the analysis board of chess.com, and I'm going to copy the moves from the score sheet of the game. Here it is. Copy the moves one by one. Hopefully I'll copy them correctly and not mess up with the moves. And let's go to the chessboard to see what is going to happen. Make sure we share the correct screen. Yep. And here we are. What's going to happen is that, no, it's not the Harry. We have to go to the other screen, the analysis screen. Yep, not the game screen. Here we are. After every move, the computer will evaluate a position. It will evaluate giving a number. Positive number means white is doing better. Negative, black is doing better. It is going to make a comment about the move, a comment, symbolic comment. In the beginning, we have book moves. So long as we follow the theory, then it is 2 exclamation points if the move is brilliant, 1 exclamation point if the move is great, a star if it's the best possible. Then we are going to have a thumbs up for an excellent move, a check mark if the move is good, and then if you see a question mark followed by exclamation point, it means that it is an inaccuracy. If you see 1 question mark, a mistake, 2 question marks, a blunder. The computer will also say which move would have been the best. And also it's going to indicate the top 5 moves of the other player whose turn is to come. And in the end of the game, we're going to do a review to see what does the computer say about the overall game. Mr. Leonard Chipkin has the white pieces, and Leonard starts with the pawn to d4. I would say more or less the second most popular first move for white. Pawn to e4 is a little bit more common. And other players may play the English opening pawn to c4, or the red tip, knight to f3, or the modern perfecto pawn to g3, or some people may even play pawn goes to b3, knight to c3. These have mostly the surprise element. Or the pawns may go to d3 or e3. The last ones are slightly inferior, but they have the element of surprise. Pawn to d4, and how do I reply? In this case, there are 2 very common answers for black. Usually the most common is knight to f6, together with pawn to d5, the symmetric one. Of course, you can play other things like pawn goes to e6 or pawn to d6, or But what I select is the one I know the best. Pawn goes to d5. The symmetric. We started symmetric. You see, book moves both of them. And let's continue. Pawn to e3 for Leonard that wants to develop his e-pawn but not to lose it to the d5 pawn. Good thing is that the bishop on f1 now you see is free to leave. Bad thing is that the bishop on c1 is blocked. That's why some players may prefer first to place the bishop on f4, the so-called London opening or London system, and then think about the pawn to e3. I now place my knight to f6, meaning doing the two most popular first moves, but in a different order. Bishop to d3 for Leonard, third move. And my bishop goes to g4, threatening the white queen. Of course, white cannot take the bishop, because if they do so, game is over. My knight takes the queen. But you see here that until the previous move, it was a book, and my move is an inaccuracy. And I'm down by 0.15. Not a huge advantage, but move number 4, I'm out of theory with an inaccuracy. Better c5 says the computer would have been the best. You see here, that's what I said, that the computer indicates which move would have been the best. How does Leonard reply? With the move that the computer thinks is the best, knight goes to e2. And now that my bishop has left its base, I'm free to push the pawn to e6 without blocking the bishop. Pawn to f3 for Leonard, that is threatening my bishop, and I need to do something about that. And my bishop goes to h5. And we completed the first 5 moves, and in spite of my inaccuracy, Leonard is ahead by only 0.01, which means nothing. Let's see how game continues. Knight to f4 for Leonard threatens my bishop on h5, and my bishop cannot be saved. If I leave it here, the knight takes it. Of course, I can take back with my knight, but I don't want my knight to be at the edge of the board. As I say, knight on the rim is grim and ready for the trim. So my bishop is going to go back to g6, but there I also lose a bishop. Knight can take it if Leonard decides so, and if he doesn't like it, he doesn't have to take it. But Leonard thinks that a bishop is more important than a knight, and most of the times it is, so he takes his knight, and I can take back. Will I take back with the f-pawn or the h? Although some beginners may think, who cares, because it is pawn takes knight in either case, here it is important to take it with the h-pawn, as you see here. As you see that with I defeat the h, I'm still ahead 0.37. With the f-pawn, I'm down 0.38. Why? Let me explain. Because the h-pawn, I opened the line for my rook, the h-file. Well, with the f-pawn, all I'm doing is I'm making my king less protected, and perhaps my opponent could have a queen or a bishop threatening the king from h5 to e8. Not yet, but potentially. Let's continue the game. Knight to d2 for Leonard, that develops his knight. And my bishop to d6, I develop my bishop now, and I'm attacking the pawn on h2. If Leonard does nothing, if I could play again, I could take it with either my rook or my bishop, ideally with the rook, and I'll explain why. Both cases I win a pawn, but if I take it with the bishop, then my bishop is pinned, and I don't want my bishop to be pinned. But I take it with the rook and either exchange rooks if that's what Leonard wants to do, or if he moves his rook, he cannot castle, and I have quite an advantage. Not winning yet, but it is important. But let's see how game continues. Leonard wants to save his pawn, and he pushes his pawn from f3 to f4, and my bishop cannot take on h2. And if my rook takes, of course, it is lost. What do I do? Let's go to the other side of the board, the queen side, pawn to c5. Let's develop there. Pawn to c3 for Leonard. And knight to c6, I develop my knight on c6, and without blocking the c-pawn, and we completed the first 10 moves. And what is the score after that? I'm ahead by 0.18. That is very little, means almost nothing. But imagine that I'm playing with a much stronger player than me, at least 300 points above me, and after 10 moves, I'm even a little bit ahead. Let's continue. Queen to f3 for Leonard. wants to control the long diagonal that goes from h1 to a8, or at least exert pressure. The queen can help him, but computer doesn't like it. Inaccuracy. And now what do? It's not among the top 5 moves, but I see pawns will start flying away, and I'd rather have myself taking the pawn and forcing the opponent to react than the other way around. They say to take is a mistake, and perhaps it is, but that's what I decided to do in this game. And you'd see why, because after I take, and Leonard can take either with the C or with the E pawn, inaccuracy is the computer, yes. Leonard does what the computer thinks the best, he uses his E pawn, because otherwise my knight can go to b4 and create havoc. And now at this point, I did what I had planned in advance, and that's the reason why I started taking on d4 other than take some initiative. Its queen goes to c7, and I'm attacking the pawn on f4 twice with my bishop on d6, queen on h7, and it's protected only once with the queen on f3. So Leonard, if he doesn't want to lose his f4 pawn, he must do something. There are many ways to defend it, and he goes by what the computer thinks is the best, pawn to g3, which protects the f4 pawn but creates weaknesses. Each time you push a pawn, you have to be aware of what you leave behind the weaknesses. For example, the h3 is a wonderful square, a very, very weak square. I don't want to put my rook there because if it's attacked, then the rook has to go back and I just wasted time move. It can be easily attacked with the queen going to g2 or other ways. So I want to bring both of my rooks on the king side, h-file ideally. How to do it? The first step is queen side castling, which the computer thinks is the best move. But since I castled, Leonard thinks he also needs to castle, and he plays a move that was not among the top 5 as you see here. Kingside castle. Mistakes is a computer. Uh, now, something I need to point out is that when the two players castle on opposite sides, then basically it's a race. Each side tries to throw its pawns usually, but at least something towards the other side and take advantage of the king that is relatively weak. What I would like is if I could get rid of the FGH pawn and throw all my pieces on the FGH files. What Leonard would like is if you could get rid of his ABC pawns and throw all his pieces on the queen side. Ideally, if my knight could disappear, he could put the rook along the C file and my queen is pinned. This is the long-term plans of each side, and the question is who is going to be faster? I place my rook on h3, the second best move according to the computer. I want to be as near the white king as possible. The problem with by placing on h3 instead of h5, that was the best move you see here, is that queen can go to g2 and attack the rook. Mistakes is a computer. But Leonard wanted to exert pressure on me because now I have to do something. And with the something I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rook from d8, the other rook send it to h8. So I have two rooks on the h file. We finished the 15 moves, computer thinks are great, and I'm ahead by 1.98. And at this point, little by little, it seems the impossible might become possible. Defeating a player of 300 points higher than me might become a reality, if only I can continue that way until the very end. But will I? Will Leonard find an ace under his sleeve, as they say, figure of speech, of course, from the magic tricks, and find a way to neutralize me and perhaps win in the end? Because when the rating difference is large among the players, things like that often happen. And some of you that may have a low rating may have seen cases where you had a very strong position against a much higher rated player only to see it suddenly disappear. But let's see what's going to happen here. Knight to f3 for Leonard, a good move. The third possible is a computer, but it's good because it controls the h2 square, the h4, and also frees the bishop on c1 that can enter the defense perhaps after the pawn goes to 5. How do I reply? My knight goes to g4, and now look at the h2 square. It's attacked 3 times by me, the rook on h3, the rook on h8, and the knight on g4. How is defended? 3 times. Knight f3, queen g2, and king h2. And so you may think I cannot take the pawn, but that is not true because if we start all the exchanges, although I take 3 times and I'm going to lose 3 times, I'm going to win more material than what I've given. Because my pieces, I have rooks while my opponent has king among the three defense. Well, I have two rooks and the knight to attack. My opponent has knight, queen, and king. But let's see how things are going to go. Leonard decides to send his knight on the f4 square. Why? To stop the contact between the two rooks. Meaning I have to be careful because if I do nothing, next move, Leonard is going to take my rook, and my rook on h8 cannot take back the queen. I didn't like it, of course, but you have to do what you see. But at least my knight on g4 saved the day because now I could take the pawn on h2. Great moves as a computer, which means that Leonard cannot use his queen to take my rook because my knight will take the queen, unless he's willing to do these exchanges, and I'll be ahead maybe a couple of points, not that much, not that dramatic, but he'll be below. What does he do? His queen goes to f3, attacking my knight on g4. Best moves as a computer, and what should I do now? I have to be careful. I don't want to lose my knight for nothing. I need to defend it. I send my pawn from f7 to f5, protects the knight on g4, but there's one little problem. Computer, of course, is the best. During the game, we had no idea it was the best. There's one little problem for me that knight from h4 can take the pawn on g6, and not only that, after it takes it, it attacks my rook on h8. But I have seen it. I knew I was going to lose that pawn because that would give me a very, very strong attack. So instead of being shocked or feeling bad about losing the pawn because Leonard actually took the pawn, I was very, very, very happy. Inaccuracy is a computer. I didn't know if it was inaccuracy, mistake, or blunder, or whatever, but I felt good about my opponent taking the pawn on g6. I was afraid of other moves. So now what do? Computer suggests a lot of things with my rook from h8. What it does not suggest is what I actually did. Rook goes to h1 check. Mistakes is a computer, and so I still have a big advantage, but half of what I had before. Queen takes, rook takes, king takes. But before king takes, we completed 20 moves, and I'm ahead by 2.62. Before I was ahead by more than 4. King takes, of course. What else can they do? And now that I have queen for two rooks, but look at the two rooks of Leonard. One is at the starting point blocked by the bishop, the a1. The other f1 is a little bit active. And also look at how exposed is the king, because material is one thing, but king safety is very important. Material, you see, white, Leonard has +1, you see it here. So what do? Let's see if we can get rid of this knight. My queen goes from c7 to f7. Knight goes to e5. And here it is relatively safe, attacks the other two knights. But computer says it's a mistake. Knight better go to h4. It gives me an enormous advantage of 5.01. I continue now, queen to h5, check the best possible move. King goes to g2. How will I continue? Queen goes to h2 check. I have a few checks, but what happens after that? Because none of them is a mate. King goes to f3. And the question is now what? Because there is no check. If the rook was not an f1, this would be a mate. Of course, I'm constraining my opponent. Leonard dare not move his rook whether to the right or to the left or the top. It's mate. But this does not necessarily win me the game. What else do I want to do? I want to use my two knights, and I hate the Leonard's knight attacking both of them. My bishop is not that useful there. It's blocked, so let's use my bishop to take the Knight, pawn takes on e5. Good. Now my knights are nice, but so what, you may say? They are still alive. They might be threatened later with the bishop on d3 light color, but not yet. And then I calculated and I saw that I needed only really one of the two knights, but a better square. So what do I do? A sacrifice. Knight from c6 takes at e5. Check. Computer will say it is brilliant because I'm sacrificing a knight for a pawn and it's a huge advantage. Now, after 25 moves, my advantage is 6.6 as you see here. It's an enormous. What can Leonard do? He only has two legal moves. If he goes to 4, queen to h6 is checkmate, which he did not do, unfortunately. He did the other choice he had. The d4 pawn takes on e5. Expectedly, now my knight from g4 will take on e5. And let's see, materially I'm down by +2, as you see, because I have one less piece, but I have... Now, let's see how is the material. It's not so simple as that. I have queen is 9 and rook 3 is 12 and 6 pawns 18. And Leonard has 2 rooks at a 10 and 2 bishops 16 and 4 pawns 20. So Leonard is ahead 20 versus 18 material, but look at that. His rook is on a1, has not moved at all. His bishops don't have too much of a scope. His rook on f1, now it can move. Before it could not move, but he'd better be careful where to place it. G1, H1, the queen will take it, only 2 squares, and then so on. And I also have a check now. So how can Leonard deal with that? He only has 2 legal moves, either to e3 or to f4. If it goes to f4, clearly I take the bishop, and now I had my +1 material, and my queen and my knight can collaborate very well towards the enemy king. What Leonard decided to do in order to save the bishop, at least that's what he thought, he places a king on e3. And still, if you saw before the computer, so it again, where are we? This is messed up a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pawn on g3, continue my attack. I don't win the bishop, I win the pawn. And what can Leonard do? No matter where he places his knight, his bishop on d3 is lost because knight and queen attack it. So he decides to place it on d4 because at least there he's hoping to win the knight. Yes, he loses a bishop, at least he'll win the knight. And then my queen takes the bishop on d3. And what Leonard was going to do, or might have thought of doing, he takes the knight, and then I take the rook. In that case, my +2 advantage is going to become +4 because I win an exchange. And there's another little detail that my king is in a light square, because if it was in, here, for example, in d8, then after I take the rook, bishop goes to g5 with a check, and then rook takes queen. Let's do it again. What would happen if my king was on d8, for example? Takes the knight, I take the rook, bishop goes to g5, king will go who knows where, and then rook takes queen. But fortunately, my king was in a light-colored square. I had seen it in advance. So at this point, after 28 moves, when my advantage was 6.87, believe it or not, Leonard resigned. And once again, I had a chance to defeat a player with a rating higher than 1900. If you remember, once recently I defeated a player with a rating of 2000, and I think it is 3 times totally, or 2 or 3 times, I defeated players with rating higher than 1900. And then The other three games continued, and the team, believe it or not, was leading with 1-0. A team that was expected to lose with 1900. Let me share the screen with you. Excuse me, a team that was expected to lose, I'm sorry, with 4-0. We're ahead 1-0. One for me, zero for Leonard Chipkin. And who knows, but we will needed still another 1.5 out of 3 points. But unfortunately, Jake Kleinman was able to get the draw, so we got 1.5, but that was it. The other two games we lost. So by winning 2.5 versus 1.5, don't think twice, got the title of the best senior team with 4.5 out of 6 points. But this is what happened myself, 5 out of 6 wins, and my rating went up from 1604 to 1656. I got 52 rating points. By the way, the highest rating I've ever had in my life is 1683. Recently I had a 1680 until it started falling down. Let's see if from 1656 I can get some extra rating points in the future tournaments to make a new personal record. But now let's go back to the analysis board and look at the review. Let's share here. And let's go to the review to see what does the computer think about the overall game. Here we are. 89.8 accuracy for me, almost 90, 81.3 for Leonard. And I played as if my rating was 2400 International Master. And Leonard played 2100, also above his own rating. Let's see the various categories. I had one brilliant move when my knight sacrificed itself for a pawn to strengthen my attack and win even more material a few moves down the road. I had three great moves, book moves, three for Leonard, two for me. Unfortunately, I was the first one with an inaccurate move, my move number 3. Best moves, 11 each of us. And of course, when we say best, we don't count the book great or brilliant. These are best that don't belong to any of the three categories above. Excellent, 6 versus 4 for me. Good, 4 versus 1 for Leonard. Two inaccuracies each of us. Mistakes, 3 for Leonard, 1 for me. I had a miss, and none of us had a blunder. And this concludes the review of what happened. Unless we find any more games from that tournament, at least we completed the review of my own games, my 6 games at the USATE, the United States Amateur Team East Championship. And I'd like to thank my teammates, and especially Captain Jake Kleinman. First of all, he accepted me in the team. He encouraged me enormously to the degree that I was a little stressed when he was expecting a monster on board 4, as he had mentioned. We had a wonderful atmosphere, companionship with my other 3 mates, and the wonderful t-shirts that we wore. Hopefully we can return next year. But what about this year? This Friday, there's a new tournament at the Queen Chess Club. I'm planning to participate. And if all goes okay, my next video is going to be my first round at the next Queen Chess Club tournament. And I hope you had the chance to learn from that, especially my way of thinking. As I mentioned before, it's not at the top level. I'm neither Grandmaster nor even international or national master. Way below that, but learning along the way. Hopefully we can all learn together. Thanks to all the viewers. Thanks to the subscribers. If you cannot subscribe yet, please consider doing. And of course to the likes and the comments. This is my grecochess YouTube channel. I am Harilaos Eniziris, and to all of you, goodbye.